Hey, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dave Bosher, and I'm going to be starting something new called Start and Restart. Now, one of the things that I have come to believe is that the single most important thing in your life is your connection with God. It is the most meaningful thing, it's the most satisfying thing, it's the most powerful thing in a person's life. And so here's what I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm going to be releasing a set of just very, very short teachings regarding just starting point things. Things like how do you find your connection with God? And when you're connected with God, where do you start your walk first? And how do you pray? And how do you change? And just things like that. And so if you're in that spot where you're starting out and frankly, either you haven't been connected with God in a very long time, or maybe you never have and now you're looking for it, I want to actually meet you where you are because everybody has to start somewhere. But I just got done filming the first video in that series. I call it the 8 ideas that connect you with God, and I'm really excited to release that. But it occurred to me as I finished up that I really need to explain something else first, and that's actually just to share a little bit of who I am and what my story is and why I'm doing this in the first place. So, like I said, my name is Dave Bosher. I'm a pastor at Lakeside Community Church, but that wasn't always the case. Uh, when I was born, I was not like a lot of people. A lot of people are born into broken families, and a lot of stories start with, once upon a time I endured this wound and this wound. And for me, that couldn't be further from the truth. I actually grew up really in a house without a lot of things to complain about. Like some people could go on Oprah and they could share all their tragic story, and the crowd would kind of sob along with them. If I were to go on one of those shows, it would just be like, this one time my dad cheated in Monopoly. I mean, stories like that are the worst thing that I had. My dad was a pastor. I was raised to be a good Christian kid, and everything was fine and dandy um, until my sophomore year of high school. What happened to me was, well, I went crazy, and I don't mean that as I don't mean that as a metaphor or hyperbole. I mean that I actually started to lose my mind. You see, my doctors were medicating me for ADHD, like a lot of kids, and you'll notice that by how much I move when I talk. Um, but what they didn't know is that there were some underlying conditions that they were exacerbating with the medications, and we didn't know that until later. And what it led to was, well, me going nuts. It led to massive depression. It led to sleepless nights. It led to psychosis and memory loss. I remember um, I remember trying out for a play. I remember performing in it. I actually don't remember learning most of the songs. I have I have a scar on my left hand right here. I have three separate memories of where it came from, none of which could logically be accurate. It's not at all an exaggeration to say that I started losing my mind. And what started occurring to me is that if all of my emotions and all of my whole experience, if all of that's just a function of whatever's wrong in my head, then a lot of what I called my spiritual experiences, that a lot of which are based in experience and emotion, and a lot of that might be nonsense too. And a lot of what I thought I believed got really shaken. And I didn't really know how to pray in a lot of ways. I do remember that there was a friend who stayed really close to me through the whole thing. She's my wife now, by the way. But then one doctor, Jo Sharon Muchler is her name, she saved my life. She figured out faster than anybody else what was wrong with me. She put in extra hours, she put in extra work, she listened to me. And literally within 2 days of her figuring out what was wrong, I was back in my right mind, but I wasn't back being right spiritually. I mean, I was still publicly that really great Christian kid. I was the goody two shoes who carried his Bible around, but deep down, I was starting to seriously wonder if there was anything real about whatever I'd believed in. Because frankly, if it's all just based on what I wanted to believe and all these superficial experiences, well, guess what? A lot of that can be accounted for just by the fact that maybe I'm defective. And so when I went off to Bible college, part of it was because I thought I might go into ministry, but the other part of it was I really needed some answers. If I was going to believe in this stuff, I was either going to be really serious about it or I was going to throw it away. But here's what happened along the way. Um, as I started digging and really asking about who God was, I found two things. One is that the answers to my questions were actually really, really compelling and beautiful. I mean, there's no story in all the world when you really understand it with clarity. There's no story in all the world like the story of Jesus Christ and his grace that you would so wish to be true. And then when you examine it more closely, you actually have the joy of finding out where it is. And I came out on the other side with those answers. By the way, a lot of who gave me those answers, he just found out after 4 years that my kid is named after him. As I started to find really, really satisfying answers, over time, my relationship with God has not only been something that is the most meaningful, most helpful thing in all of my life, because somebody was willing to come alongside me and answer some really basic questions that I didn't even feel like I was supposed to have. But the other thing that happened is that I have started to really change dramatically. And some of that can be accounted for by the fact that, you get older and you change, but this is not that. I recently got to speak at a conference. And look, if you know me, you're going to laugh when I say this because you'll know how true it is. If you know me and you go back far with me, one of the things you know about me is that I have just a tremendously arrogant attitude and personality. I mean, I have so much of a pride problem, it's not even funny. I spoke at a conference recently, and someone who hadn't seen me in a couple of years actually walked up and said, I think most people would be bothered by this, but I wasn't. He actually came up and said, you know, you're a lot less of an arrogant jerk than you used to be. That's a pretty dramatic. And I actually, most people would consider that an insult. And I'm like, thank you. And he said, no, seriously, there's no way years ago you could have stood up in front of all of those people and not drank in the attention for everything it was worth to bolster your ego. But I didn't see any of that. And there were 3 different people that said that. And it's not something that I've been doing to myself. It's something that has been happening to me. And over the years, I have kind of felt this longing to reach out to people who frankly never got those answers, or nobody ever came out and helped them. It's astonishing how much the church just does not answer really basic starting point questions for people that are just wondering about this. And instead we kind of pay attention to the more, quote, advanced stuff. But because that's where I was, that's where my passion is. And by God's grace, I've gotten to carry on conversations with some people. And I have gotten to see his power really start to do things. And it's to the point now where, making and growing disciples of Jesus Christ is something that I would do the rest of my life. Like if my job evaporated as a pastor tomorrow and nobody was paying me to do this, I would do this every day until I am dead. Because I think I have found something here that is so helpful and so compelling. And the deeper I go, the more detailed and the more compelling I find the answers are. And the more of God I start to find, the more whole that I think I've started to become. Out of all those conversations I've had, there's a very predictable set of hangups that I think a lot of people struggle with that we hardly ever talk about. And there's a lot of really basic things that a lot of people who are already Christians are even embarrassed that they haven't figured out. And what I want to do over the next however many weeks it is that I'm filming these things, man, this could go on for a really long time. I want to share with you some just simple basic starting point ideas to help you out as best I can. So if you're here and you're still listening, I thank you. If you're not a Christian or you feel you're tangentially connected with God, just know that I love you. I want to help you as best I can. Your hangups are welcome here. Your questions are welcome. I promise I have had those same doubts. But if you're sitting here too and you're listening and you're somebody who is a Christian, I want you to know that God wants to use you in that space where other people are starting out to create a gracious space where people can ask questions and start to wonder. So I look forward to releasing more in the coming weeks. Actually, tomorrow I'm going to be starting off with a video I'm really excited about called The 8 Ideas That Connect You with God. From there, we're going to spend each video talking about some of the very predictable hangups that people have. And then we're going to start talking about just the very simple things that you do to start walking. And whether you're starting or restarting that relationship, or you're looking to just gain a little bit of confidence in having those conversations with people that you know and love, my prayer is that what I'm producing here would be really, really helpful to you. So may God bless you as you seek after him wherever you are, because everybody has to start somewhere and everybody has to restart somewhere too.